Welcome back to the Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I'm glad to have my good friend Chris Corso. He's a regular on the program. Brings a lot of interesting content about how law relates to business and how law relates to our lifestyles. And he's really my go-to guy when it comes to civil liberty issues and personal liberties issues. He's awesome at in this important space. His website is Corso Law Group. That's Corso lawgroup.com. He has offices in Arizona and here in the Houston area. Chris, good to talk to you.
You too, Kevin. It's always a pleasure.
Tom Brady, he is, he's been getting in the headlines for reasons that people don't want to be in the headlines. And let's talk. I'd like you to begin. Of course, he's also in the headlines for reasons why people do want to be in the headlines. but talk a little bit about the story that has caught the attention not only of the sports community but really of the legal community as well.
Yeah, this thing has taken on a life of its own, and we've mentioned it passing here and there on the show. I'm probably not going to make too many friends in Houston here because I fall on the side of the Brady camp on this for many different reasons. But basically, what's happening here and what's happened, this thing has gone on for about a year and a half now. The NFL found something real quickly. The NFL found a couple of deflated balls over a year ago in the AFC Championship game, and they did a complete ridiculous investigation on this, spending about $6 million, and they found that the balls were deflated and that Tom Brady may possibly have had something to do with it. So they issued a 4-game suspension. Brady appealed it, to a federal court, and the suspension was overturned. The NFL has since appealed that decision and brought that up higher to a federal appellate court in Manhattan, and they won now. Just this past week, they ruled in the NFL's favor and reinstated the suspension. So, and some of the reasons behind it were related to the commissioner of the league, dishing out the penalty and hearing the appeal at the same time. And this was what some of the arguments that the Brady camp had against it. So that, in a nutshell, is really what went on here.
So as of now, he's suspended for 4 games.
As of right now, yeah, he is.
What recourse does the Brady camp have going forward?
Well, now they can petition back to the same appellate court to hear it again, and basically, talk about it again, hear it again, and see if present some different evidence and so on to try to get that ruling overturned. And this could keep going all the way up to the Supreme Court. If that happens, the Supreme Court, it will happen after his 4-game suspension, I would think, right? Yeah. Well, that's what they're trying to do. I mean, every time this gets heard, the suspension gets held in check. It just kind of sits there in limbo and wait. We wait because if he serves the suspension, then the whole appeal is pointless at that in that situation. So
right,
but
if
he'll be retired by the time they see it,
Right, exactly. Which means they would be doing it for principle rather than any practical or tactical reason.
Yeah. But I'll tell you. Go ahead, Kevin.
My question I was going to have is, the way the media has postured it is the fact that he got rid of his phone that apparently had incriminating messages in it, or that's the assumption is that there are incriminating messages in it. That became kind of a smoking gun. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, he did that, and it was definitely a bad move. Whether it had anything to do with it or not, it just doesn't look good. And every judge throughout this process has brought that up.
Right.
It really gets away from the whole point of, to me, equal protection and due process in this whole thing. And it really doesn't have much to do with it, but it just doesn't look good, for him with whatever was on there. But they have very little, in the actual offense of deflating the ball, they have very little on him to issue this kind of a punishment. But to me, that's not really the biggest issue here. The biggest issue that we're fighting is, the problem with all of this has been, and the problem I have with all of this is, the NFL, for my purposes in my world, serves as basically the government in this thing. And basically what's happening here is you have the commissioner of the league who has broad authority to issue any type of penalty that he sees fit. And so what happened with this situation, he issued a penalty that was, unprecedented. Nobody has ever seen it. There's no basis for it. There's no guideline. So he basically issued a penalty, and everybody was trying to figure out, where did you get this from? You pulled it out of the air. There's no process, procedure, precedent for giving out a 4-game suspension for an equipment violation, basically, when in the past it had always been a fine. And so that's one of the problems that the Brady camp had, and said, hey, look, there's no guideline here. In a criminal world, you have a sentencing guideline. You have a range of a penalty to go with when you do something wrong. Here, there's nothing. There's no range. And that's
I like where you're going. First of all, I'm not a Patriot fan. I'm from the Midwest, and so in the Midwest, I at least, you either gravitated towards Chicago or Green Bay. For whatever reason, I did Chicago. No one's a Lion fan. I grew up in Detroit, but no one's a Lion. No one I do, but I have too much self-esteem for that. And then of course, being in Texas, I've either been an Oiler or a Texans fan, never a Cowboy fan. So and there's a sense that there's a certain amount of a latitude given to the Bills. There's a sense that they can do things that other teams can't. That irritates every other fan of every other team. And I know you know what I'm talking about, even though I know you probably don't agree with that. But, I do like what you're saying. There's an arbitrary nature around this that smacks of injustice.
Yeah, and I guess for full disclosure, I should say that I've been a Patriot season ticket holder for 25 years. And I'm from that area of the country, and I take exception to that, and the reason why I do is because, and real quick, it isn't really the leeway and all that. I disagree with that. What I think is, when you're successful and you've been on top for 15 years, the world wants to knock you down.
Sure.
We're a society of build you up and knock you down. Because I'll tell you what, if this were the Detroit Lions, like you talked about, none of this would be happening.
You are absolutely right. In fact, they would make that quarterback play more games.
Right. But Kevin, you're right. It is arbitrary, and that's the problem. Not to mention the fact, look, they've collectively bargained, to allow the commissioner to be the arbitrator, to be the judge, jury, and executioner here. They've, the Players Association agreed to that. So to me, they have less argument there. And then you have to understand the Players Association is behind Brady with all of this too. So they're backing him up on this. Obviously, they have to. So they agreed to that, to allow him. But from a standpoint of regular people in the world, that's just, you scratch your head and you think, okay, so this is a person who can assess the situation, listen to all the evidence, give the penalty, and also hear the appeal for it, and be a witness in it too. Picture a judge sitting on the bench, running down to the witness stand, then running to the prosecutor table, then running back to the witness stand, then running back up to the
right.
That's basically what's happening here.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. By the way, Matt Stafford is a great quarterback on a something wrong with them team. So, I don't want all the Stafford fans coming after me. But, I get what you're saying, and I totally for the first time, because, again, I have my own bias. You have your own bias, I have my own bias. I totally get what you're saying, though. The reality is that, the commission itself the league itself probably needs to put together, and there's enough NFL history, needs to put together guidelines on what the punishment's going to be and be in agreement on that and even vote on that rather than him serve as an arbitrary ruler over the situation. And almost, I'm beginning to think that this was his opportunity to push back that perception that life is easier for the New England Patriots than it is for other teams. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that. Well, look, when you look at Tom Brady, you have the All-American quarterback married to a supermodel. Decent-looking, good-looking guy. This is, people see this and they say he's got too much. But I think that, I think you're right in the sense of, the commonality here in the country outside of New England is these guys. Let's get these guys off the top here. I mean, this is not good for the league to have one team that just dominates every year. So, I mean, I don't know if that's something behind it. What I think is more of it is that Goodell, who's the commissioner, had a bad couple of years. He had a lot of issues with, the players with domestic violence offenses, really doing some bad things out there. And his penalties, put it this way, he took a guy that beat up his wife, okay? And he gave him a 2-game suspension for that, okay?
Right.
He gave Brady a 4-game suspension for possibly having something to do with taking 2 pounds per square inch out of a football air. So he took a beating when he gave that guy 2 games. And so I think he's trying to come back and get his name a little better. And by doing that, let's take the highest profile team and guy in the league and let's really drop the hammer on him. That's what's happening here.
I think you're probably right. Chris Corso's with the Corso Law Group. That's CORSO lawgroup.com. I think you probably won some minds over. I don't think you won hearts over. I think there's a lot of people who heard this who still don't like the New England Patriots. That includes me. You and I will stay friends. But I do agree with you. Fundamentally, the more I think about it, there's something wrong. There's not only arbitrary, but even arrogant the way this was done. And so, and that's not good for anyone if you want to maintain rule of law, which we need in everything, including sports. So I appreciate you bringing this to us.
Houston won't like it in about week 3 or 4. I think they play each other. So.
Yeah. Chris Corso, Corso Law Group. When we come back, we're going to have more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here does show up over there at usdailyreview.com, including this interview. While they're like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter.